What if one basketball player stepped onto the court to face an entire five-man team completely alone, but every basket they made was worth 20 points? Picture this: Michael Jordan in his prime, but instead of having Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman beside him, the court stretches empty, except for 5 opponents closing in from every angle. It sounds impossible, like a fever dream born from too many video games and sports debates. But let's dive into this mathematical madness and see what would actually unfold. Let us start with the brutal reality. 1 person against 5 is not a fair fight in any traditional sense. In regular basketball, even the greatest players in history need teammates to create space, set screens, and provide passing options. But our lone warrior doesn't have any of that luxury. Every possession becomes a heroic solo mission against overwhelming odds. The question isn't whether they can win, it's whether the mathematical advantage of 20-point baskets can overcome the fundamental disadvantage of being outnumbered. Here's where the numbers get fascinating. In a typical NBA game, teams score around 110 points. Our solitary player would need just 6 successful baskets to match that total. 6 shots. Meanwhile, the opposing team would need their usual 40 to 50 made shots, depending on their mix of 2-pointers and 3-pointers. On paper, this seems like a reasonable trade-off, but basketball isn't played on paper. The opposing team's strategy would be unlike anything we've ever seen in basketball. Forget traditional defense. They'd essentially play a game of human pinball, with all 5 players converging on our lone scorer like antibodies attacking a virus. They wouldn't need to worry about leaving anyone else open, because there is nobody else. Every defensive principle learned since Dr. Naismith invented the game would be thrown out in favor of one simple mandate: prevent this person from getting a clean look at the basket at all costs. But here's where our solo player's superhuman scoring ability creates an interesting dynamic. The opposing team can't afford to foul. A single foul leading to free throws could result in 40 points, 2 free throws at 20 points each. Suddenly, the strategy of hack a player becomes suicide by player. The defenders would have to play perfect, clean defense while swarming like angry bees. Let's talk about stamina, because this is where reality crashes into our hypothetical scenario like a freight train. Professional basketball players are among the world's elite athletes, but even LeBron James or Kevin Durant would be gasping for air within minutes of trying to play 1 versus 5. Every possession would require superhuman effort just to get a shot attempt. Our lone player would be running, cutting, and fighting through contact on every single play with no relief, no substitutions, and no teammates to share the burden. The mathematical beauty emerges when we consider shot attempts. If our solo player could somehow manage just 10 shot attempts per game, it's a modest number by NBA standards, and make 30% of them, they'd score 60 points. That's already enough to win many NBA games. But achieving even 10 attempts against 5 dedicated defenders would be like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while being tackled by a rugby team. The court itself becomes a character in this drama. Basketball courts are 94 feet long and 50 feet wide. A lot of space for one person to cover, but also a lot of space for 5 people to control. Our lone player would need to use every inch of that court, running patterns that would make a marathon runner weep. They'd become part point guard, part shooting guard, part escape artist, and part miracle worker. But let's push this scenario to its logical extreme. What if our solo player was having an incredible shooting night? What if they made half their attempts? With just 8 successful baskets, they'd have 160 points, enough to beat any team in NBA history. The record for most points scored by a team in an NBA game is 186 by the Detroit Pistons in 1983. Our lone player could theoretically approach that. With fewer than 10 made shots, the psychological warfare would be intense. Imagine being one of the 5 defenders, knowing that every defensive breakdown doesn't cost 2 or 3 points, it costs 20. The pressure would be suffocating. Players would be afraid to help on defense, afraid to rotate, afraid to make any decision that might leave our super scorer with even a fraction of an opening. Paranoia would replace strategy. Now picture the opposing team's offense. They'd have a massive numerical advantage, essentially playing a permanent 5-on-0 fast break. Every possession should be an easy basket. But here's a psychological twist. They know that their easy 2-point baskets are worth only 1/10 of their opponent's shots. The mental math would be crushing. They'd need to score on every single possession just to keep pace with a player who makes every fifth attempt. The endgame scenarios would be surreal. Late in the fourth quarter, with the score tied, both teams would face impossible decisions. The five-man team would want to slow down the pace, milk the clock, and limit possessions. Meanwhile, our lone player would be desperately trying to create just one more scoring opportunity. It would be chess played at the speed of lightning, with points flying across the scoreboard in chunks of 20. Here's where the scenario becomes almost philosophical. What defines basketball? Is it still basketball when fundamental concepts like teamwork, ball movement, and balanced scoring disappear? Our game would transform into something that resembles basketball, but operates under completely different rules of engagement. It would be like watching a boxing match where one fighter's punches count as knockdowns. The conditioning required would be otherworldly. Our solo player would need the endurance of a marathon runner, the agility of a gymnast, and the shooting accuracy of a sniper, all while being constantly harassed by 5 professional athletes. They'd be burning calories at a rate that would make Tour de France cyclists jealous, all while maintaining the mental clarity needed to sink shots worth 20 points each. Television broadcasts would need new graphics packages just to handle the scoring bursts. Imagine the crowd's reaction when our lone warrior drains a contested three-pointer and the scoreboard jumps by 20 points in an instant. The arena would erupt like a volcano, only to watch the opposing team casually score a layup worth a measly 2 points in response. The emotional whiplash would be unprecedented. But perhaps the most mind-bending aspect is this. Our solo player would uneven need to be an elite shooter to succeed. A player shooting just 25% from the field, which would be historically terrible by professional standards, would still average 5 points per attempt. That's more than any player in NBA history has ever averaged per shot. The mathematical advantage is so overwhelming that mediocre shooting becomes legendary. The beauty of this impossible scenario lies in its mathematical elegance. Basketball becomes a pure equation. Can one person, armed with the ultimate scoring multiplier, overcome the fundamental advantage of having 4 extra players? It's David versus Goliath, but David's slingshot is loaded with mathematical impossibility instead of stones. In the end, our hypothetical game would be decided by something we rarely see in professional sports. Pure mathematical efficiency versus pure physical advantage. Every possession would be a clash between the possible and the impossible, between individual brilliance and collective strength. And when the final buzzer sounds, regardless of who wins, we'd have witnessed something that has never existed in sports history. A contest where one person's individual excellence was mathematically amplified to compete with an entire team's collective effort. It would be beautiful, exhausting, and completely insane. So the next time you watch a basketball player miss an open shot, remember our lone warrior, somewhere in an alternate universe? Knowing that miss just cost them 20 points and possibly the game, suddenly every shot in regular basketball seems wonderfully, perfectly balanced. And maybe that's exactly how it should be.